Hello, welcome to the Alchemists Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily and Happy New Year.
Yeah, just about. I'm KristaLyn, and we are going to ground the year in a sort of recap. What do you do at the end of the year? How does that energetically affect you, even though it's an arbitrary date on a calendar and not like astrologically significant or anything? How has the collective kind of given it meaning? And what do you do with it? How can you make the most of it anyway?
Yeah, we were talking about like what should we do for this episode? How do we wrap up the year? Because even though it is an arbitrary date, because so much collective energy is thrown towards it, it's actually a pretty significant energetic event that occurs for all of us. So the energy you're feeling as a buildup for this like New Year stuff, that's not pretend just because the planets aren't necessarily saying this is a new year. It is very much real. You're just experiencing in a, like kind of a collective space. And it's really important, or we think it's really important, to look at how the energy changed over the last year, how we individually changed as people, and hopefully that helps you reflect on how you maybe changed as a person, because we don't do that enough genuinely as people, because we're so good at looking forward and stressing about the future. We forget to like collect our pieces that we leave along the way. And then also just give you some understanding of exciting things to look forward to in the new year, stuff we're excited about, the energy stuff that's coming up, and just kind of gather it all together. And we're also going to talk about some of our favorite books from the year, because that's fun. And we like that. It's also technically our bookend episode anyway. So we're just like, it's just a big bookend. It's a big one.
It's an annual bookend.
And the annual bookend.
Astrology doesn't like complete a cycle necessarily on the new year, but on this new year in particular, there really is an Auld Lang Syne sort of vibe of should old things be put to rest and never brought to mind. Because on this New Year's, we will have Venus conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So relationships may be being put to rest, right? So should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? But at the same time, we're still feeling very hesitant about moving forward because Mars is retrograde in Gemini, but Mercury, who rules Mars right now, is retrograde in Capricorn. So we have this double retrograde whammy kind of thing going on, specifically through the first 2 weeks of January. And really kicking off just in the last days of this year. So Mercury is going to go retrograde on the 29th of December through, I believe it's the 18th of January. Mars will go direct on the 12th. So that's when at least one of them will let up. And that's exciting because Mars has been retrograde since October 30th. And virtually every client that I've talked to has been experiencing some kind of complication with this. And it's a bigger one because Mars doesn't retrograde as often, like Mars retrogrades.
And he's annoying.
Yeah, well, and he's like,
and he's
Gemini.
Just annoying and being an ass.
Yeah. Mars takes a little bit longer to do the retrogrades in between cycles and stuff. Venus retrograded last year in Capricorn. And that's important because she stationed retrograde conjunct Pluto in Capricorn last year. And she has returned there now on the 1st of this year. So we're talking about old acquaintance, possibly from December 2021. That you might be thinking about and really completing that cycle, or in some cases doubling down on something in that cycle. Just saying like, this is what I went over and it's either gone or it's deeper rooted. It's now intense. So those are things to really think about. It's like extreme makeover or renovation soul edition, or relationship edition, however you want to look at that. Yeah. And there are a couple other things happening throughout the week. We have Mercury will form a sextile with Neptune the day that Venus moves into Aquarius, because she'll be conjoining with Pluto just before tipping into Aquarius. So she'll be getting out of Capricorn, moving into Aquarius, then we'll form a lovely sextile with Jupiter, which is nice. Jupiter's in Aries, so they'll be, I believe, at the first couple degrees of their signs, creating an opportunity for humanitarian efforts to make something happen, to really get a vision of, I want to do this and I have the drive to do it. And I know how to make it sustainable, which is really cool. Yeah. And then on the 5th, the sun will trine Uranus, which marks Uranus getting ready to station again, but this time direct. And when Uranus does that on January 22nd, all of the planets will be direct until, I have this listed somewhere, all planets will be direct. God forbid I have this written down where I can find it, until I believe it's like April.
We're in Mercury retrograde right now. When does this?
Pre-shadow right now, the 29th.
Pre-shadow, 29th. That's right. Okay. So when this comes out, basically we'll be in retrograde.
Yeah, we'll be about there.
Okay.
And
I was like, it doesn't feel like retrograde yet. So I was We're recording this on Monday, the 26th.
Yeah.
So,
and normally I like to say, like, don't get too, irritated about it, because Mercury does retrograde 4 times a year. Mercury retrogrades more than anybody. But this time, because Mercury is also accountable for Mars, who is retrograde, we have, I think, it was in the last episode where we were talking about chaperones, right? So remembering that the chaperone is a bit of a wild card around wild card children on a field trip kind of thing. So this is where, like, if you're the museum guide, you're probably not having a great day watching this particular group. So
I just got the night at the museum, like the curator of the museum.
That's what I got too. Yeah.
I
was also thinking Percy Jackson, where they are on a field trip. And one of the things that Percy does that sort of initiates the journey happens. And it's like, could you imagine being someone who works there and then having to clean up after that? So, yeah. Your story reference for the day.
Museum. That's great. Right? I love it so much.
It's a good one. I like it. But so that's the initial energy we're coming into. So again, that Auld Lang Syne song, the feelings you get along with that are probably going to hit a little more this year, because the words really reflect how we're feeling and what we're existing in. And the way that I like to kind of let people know is, if you're making a New Year's resolution, which we can kind of talk about a little bit more about, like how to make really good, positive, aligned New Year's resolutions this year, especially this first week, give yourself the ability to adjust your New Year's resolution. You can make one and know you're going to stick to it, and that's totally fine. But you can also say, this is changeable. This is mutable. This is open for interpretation. And I'm going to understand it better over the next few weeks in a way that I can grow and sustain and, stick with it. So if it feels hard at first, let it flow, like let it be weird and see what it does. And then when it settles and you can accept it for what it is, you'll be able to actually have a goal that's doable.
Yeah. I also recommend, this is always my number one tip, especially if you're wanting to make a New Year's resolution that like is changing yourself in some way. Start, instead of being like, this is my resolution, it is this big energy that I'm going to do. I'm going to work out a whole bunch, or, I'm going to read 500 books or whatever it is. Start instead of that, understand where you want to go with it, but make one promise to yourself that you keep each day, and don't make it big. Make it something that's very natural, like washing your face, taking your dog for a walk, like little things, but make sure you keep that, because then it will snowball and your energy is going to build on itself, because you'll be building trust back with yourself that you will have lost over the last year. And that will help you actually reach those energetic, oh my gosh, I want to like pull a card, like whatever it is. It's one small promise you keep to yourself each day that naturally fits into your schedule. That is genuinely the best way to manifest and accomplish any New Year's resolution. I can't stress it enough.
Yeah. And you may already be mulling over something that is going to end up being your retrograde project, which may turn into your resolution. For me, like, I'm reworking the way I do social media and spend my time on social media, content creation and things like that. Mercury and all of this stuff is happening in my third house, my communication, my content creation, so to speak. So, I've already been thinking about that. I'm already starting to play with that. And I'm already saying, okay, I noticed that this is very Mercury retrograde in the third house themed. So I'm going to give myself the time to let it be funky. And I'm probably going to put little disclaimers in my social media, like testing this out. What do you think? And it's going to come down to just what feels right and what falls into place. And that's okay. And you can do, like you said, small little things and just kind of drip it into whatever it becomes.
Yeah, I have realized that genuinely, my Saturn return is wrapping up. And in literally, I'm so happy. But in literally the last 2 weeks, the pieces have clicked together of, oh, this is what I'm doing going forward. Oh, this makes perfect sense. This is already the themes I'm embodying next year, and I didn't even think about it. Basically, it's doing psychic history. I guess that's the root of it. Obviously, writing historical fantasy fiction books, that's huge, but also channeling people who lived in the past, that sort of thing, going to historical locations, channeling there. Like, it's what I've loved since I was itty bitty and I could barely talk. That's what I've loved. So it makes perfect sense. But of course, I abandoned it as an adult. My Saturn returns like, haha, psych, you're in kindergarten again. Have fun.
Yep. And that's a huge thing.
Yeah. So that I already know, like, it's been that clicking moment of like, oh, this is where I'm going now. I get it.
Mhm.
Cool. So for those of you who maybe haven't seen me pop up on social media lately, I've started a series on channeled history where I'm talking currently about the Julian Claudian line and channeling in people from that line in ancient Rome. It's super fun, but that is what I've started to do. So like same thing, testing out new stuff on social media, but I could not be more excited to be wrapping up my Saturn return and finally feel like I know at least a general idea of where I'm going, because anyone who's gone through their Saturn return or is going through, you don't know. You just don't know
No.
the whole time.
And it's really funny for anybody who is wrapping up their Saturn return. This is a great year-end thing to be talking about. Year-end. I'm an immature person, but anyway, it's important to remember. Like, I remember after my Saturn return, I would go into certain situations and just be like, "Oh, this is going to be hard again." And then I was like, "No, wait! I'm in the part of my life now where it may not have to be hard." And so you remind yourself of these affirmations of like, it doesn't always have to be hard. And now is the time where I can prove that it doesn't have to be hard. So I can go into this with a little bit more hope than I've conditioned myself to have over the last 3 years of Saturn return. But you'll notice like, oh, it really isn't as hard. I'm still mind blown. And my Saturn was in Capricorn. I'm still mind blown at some of the changes that have happened in my life. To be fair, anybody who's like, wow, that was 3 years ago, why are you still experiencing it? Pluto came to sit on my Saturn. So it was kind of like extended a little bit, but I'm still having this experience of like, that can be that easy. I didn't know something could be that easy or that this could be easier. I didn't see the other side of that. And so you're going to find a lot of that happening as your Saturn return wraps up and says, good job. You made it through boot camp.
Yeah. What I've realized is a big learning thing for me over this time is for my Saturn return, I was closing up the I must be of service loop, because everything I had done leading up to that is how can I serve other needs? What do other people want from me? Like, yes, I have all this psychic knowledge and I've been sharing it in a way that benefits others predominantly more than anything else, which is not a bad thing, but that's always how I've provided value. And this last little clicking, I've been like, oh no, now I need to remind myself that the things I share that I'm passionate about matter to others too, and I can share those spaces as well. So don't worry, I'm not like completely departing from any sort of like educational content, but I'm just moving away from like my niche is exclusively having to help versus getting to actually share passion stuff, which is very new to me, because even, I mean, growing up as a neurodivergent kid, and anyone who's neurodivergent can definitely agree with this, if you shared any of your passion for anything, it was too much for anybody ever. And I was a horse girl, so put that out there. I was a horse girl who was obsessed with history. So like when I say obsessed, guys, I mean it. I read a lot of books when I was a kid. My mom was also a librarian, so I spent most of my time there. But like, obviously, those were passions that the average fourth grader was like, you're fucking weird. So now I'm getting back to that state of like, oh, I can share my passions, and we're in a space where there's now like reciprocal energy, which is just exciting and cool. So that's, I think, one of my biggest takeaways, especially from last year. My whole Saturn return, which has been like 3 years, but specifically last year.
I feel you as I wear my like fandom cloak blanket, which is very cozy if anybody's wondering. And if you can tell just by this who this is and what character it is on the YouTube video, bonus points if you comment who this is and what video game they're from. So there's your clue.
Good job. I like the clue.
Thanks.
It's super fun. I know Krista showed up wearing their cloak blankie, and I was like, oh, you look snuggly. Like, it's great.
It's like, I know the listeners won't mind, so it's great.
No, not at all. If anything, everyone should be wearing a cloak blanket. Come on now.
Yeah, it was
I almost wore my onesie, but I have like more professional calls later in the day, so I like did makeup functioned. So, this year's been an interesting one. So, like, I know we're in like a succession of like 3 years that have been very intense, and I don't want to in any way belittle that. Each year has been its own flavor of intensity. This year has been, and I've said this multiple times on here, it's like the final stage of grief, very much so. So we're working through what we need to let go in order to accept things, in order to move on, whatever. Like, that's been the theme of this year in a huge way. And it's been fucking painful. I think this is the year that was actually the most painful for people.
Yeah.
For me, it definitely was. There was a lot of like pain and like weird grief and just like very intense energy. But even when I've talked to people, when I've looked at the energy, it's like 2020 was like, whoa, shock factor adjustment. But when we look back on it, honestly, a lot of people really enjoyed 2020. It was one of the best years of my entire
Mhm.
life. And I will say that with my full chest. It really was. And I'm not saying that it was great for everyone. It definitely wasn't. There was ups and
Mhm.
downs massively. Lots of people passed, like tons of stuff happened, not belittling any of that experience. But when we look back on it, there's a fondness because it was a
Mhm.
big catalyst moment, which we all really, really, really fucking needed
It was a
really bad.
catalyst moment, and it was this moment of ignorance where we got to just
Mhm.
sit in not knowing, and we were
Yeah.
allowed to not know for a while. And
Mhm.
how is that not something that happens more? And then you're right, like 2021 was sort of kind of getting past the anger phase and the denial phase. And 2022 really has been the phase of accepting there is no going back. We are, totally different people. Gosh, in the last 3 months, I'm a whole new person than I
There you
was.
go.
It's been
Mhm.
so catalytic. And then you think about the last phase of grief is acceptance. We're
Yeah.
done bartering. We're done with all of that stuff. We're in acceptance now. And
Mhm.
there's a bittersweet, nostalgic sort of, I have to leave that stuff behind, whatever that stuff might be, in order
Yeah.
to keep growing because something else is waiting for me. And I can't fathom it yet.
Mhm.
And honestly, if you feel like we're on the precipice of something that you just can't understand yet, the energy, the
Yes.
astrology, yes.
Yes.
And
Just yes.
we'll be getting clearer on that. I would say like in the second quarter of the year, like the first quarter of the year is going to be a whole lot of like, I feel something coming. What is this? What's going on?
It
And
feels
then
like you just hit the booster button on Mario Kart, and so you're
mm,
going really fast, but you don't know what's around the corner, but you're going really
yeah,
fast.
yeah, that's a perfect way of saying it too. And so, yes, like we can validate your experience, which is what a lot of metaphysical stuff tends to do, especially when you're already pretty well aligned at listening to your own intuition, which many of our viewers and listeners are. Hey guys.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so it's going to be a really interesting first quarter with a
Mhm.
lot. But again, to me, when I lean into the feeling of it and think about the placements involved and things like that, it feels very like the universe, God, source throwing resources at you and you
Yeah.
catching all of them and being like, I know how to put these together. And you're like speed solving a Rubik's Cube. And then by the time you do that, you're like, oh, I can solve a Rubik's Cube. Well, now I know what to do next. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the feeling that you get from it. It's like a trial by fire, but you do it and like you can
Yeah.
handle it.
First quarter feels like air to me.
It is. Well, you have Aquarius and stuff. Yeah.
But it feels like air. It feels very like blustery, lots of stuff
Mhm.
coming at us, lots of movement. We're just like, wee, here we go. And then we immediately sink into the earth in the second quarter. It's just like, whoa, here we are.
Yeah.
But in a grounded way, that's nice. It's like we can actually now do something with all the pieces we gathered while we were in the tornado of positivity. It's a positive
Yeah.
tornado. I'm not trying to like, don't freak out. But yeah, it feels like a happy, positive tornado of a lot of things going on. And then we like all of a sudden are grounded with it. Like, oh,
Yeah. I feel like
I can put
in
this there. That moves in this way.
Yeah. In my read on the energy, again, thinking about the aspects and just how astrologers have this thing where we can see what's coming, but knowing exactly how it's going to show up. Like again, 2020 threw a lot of astrologers for a loop because we saw it. We were like, it could be this. Some astrologers were like on point because experience had helped educate them enough to be really discerning. But
Mhm.
you even remember, like, I could feel the energy, I could interpret it, but I wasn't expecting that,
No one was expecting
So
that.
as we're coming to another decent shift with a lot of things happening at once, I'm hesitant to make too light of it or to be too optimistic going into it. But that's not to say that it's going to be bad. I just don't want to give toxic positivity or delude somebody into thinking that, there's nothing to prepare for. So what I'm specifically looking at is Saturn moving out of domicile.
Mhm.
So with Saturn moving out of domicile as one of the factors that happens in March, the thing to me of that is Saturn is not as able to Saturn as loud, which is kind of
Mhm.
okay, right? But it's also not as supported. It doesn't have all the resources. So there may be certain restrictions in certain areas that are going to be a little bit jarring. And so
Mhm.
that's like, if there's a caveat in this whole cluster of things, that's the one I'm keeping my eye on. I think that's going to bring a lot of accountability and possible regulations to things that are not often regulated, which is going to rub a lot of people the wrong way. And it's also going to confuse and make some people feel, I want to use the word panicked, but just because they're off kilter. Like, I didn't see this coming. I'm thrown off. I don't know this stuff. So like, I actually have a client right now who is preparing to be a lawyer specifically for metaphysical practitioners, because as metaphysical practitioners, we don't always know the law. And then we feel very thrown off when we have to do something that is so tangible, black and white, like liturgical, whatever law.
Yeah.
And so this client of mine is like, yeah, I see that. And she was also a forgotten storyteller at one point too. Rocking, amazing person. And when she is ready to reveal this, I will probably let you guys know who she is. So if you come across something, you'll know exactly who to go to. But it's just this beautiful thing that she's like, I feel like I need to do this. And I'm like, that is the astrology. You're getting ready to help all of these people who are going to be thrown a little bit off by needing to have credentials or I's dotted and T's crossed where they weren't aware of before because of new things coming in. So my idea for that, like how to prepare for that as someone who's listening, is one of your experimental resolutions could be like, if you needed to kind of let someone know that you were trustworthy, how would you present that information in a sea of other people who are doing the same thing with maybe less integrity? So just think about that. Could show up in certifications, that could show up in degrees, but it could also show up in years of experience. And it can also show up in your actual integrity that you have, that you can, put to a test and show to people. It can show up in a portfolio that you've begun to create for yourself. Just how would you show that? And just have stuff together. If you need it, it's there. And again, more and more people will emerge to be able to help with that as well. So be discerning in the people that you put your trust into to help you on these paths that are not your zone of genius and are theirs. Using a friend or another contact is very helpful when it's not something that you're used to, but they are. So that's great. Cooperation and collaboration in that sense. But then thinking about the other two that I'm kind of interested in, we have Mars finally getting out of Gemini, which is going to be a relief for everybody. That's Mars moving into water, where Mars has some triplicity ability in there. So like a couple resources, but we're still like in a foreign land, but we brought our comfort foods. I've got my trail mix, but I'm still not where I'm comfortable. So at least I have that. And that's not necessarily great or awful. Mars is going to move on and like, it'll be fine. Pluto is going to dip into Aquarius for the first time. And this one I'm excited about for the most part. When I think about it, there are things to think about. There's always two sides of a coin. But I think that ultimately when Pluto gets back into Aquarius and stays for a while until like 2040, what we're going to see over the next 20 years is going to be refreshing. And that's how it feels to me. But Pluto's going to dip into Aquarius and almost immediately retrograde back into Capricorn for like the rest of the year, and then finally get into Aquarius, I think at the end of this year or into 2023. Then we begin the generation of Aquarius.
You mean 2024?
That, I'm living in such, I don't know what year it is, but thank you. 2024. Yeah. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that was a lot, but that's sort of what I feel like we're going to be getting into for the first quarter, and then what that shift might feel like in March, so that you don't feel as caught off guard if you're already thinking ahead, and again, setting your goals accordingly in a helpful way.
To change direction a little bit from the future, let's go back past. What were some of your highlights from this past year? What is like your highlight reel?
Oh man.
What are some of your favorite things?
Favorite things from the past year? It's been I've called this year a tale of two cities for me, because it's been the best of times and the worst of times. Which, like, I'm not mad about it. I can accept the worst, and I love having the best. I think the best thing for me this year has been our programs that we do together, this podcast. Amazing. The sense of purpose and the fact that I feel like what I have to offer is actually useful to people is amazing. And I'm grateful to all of our listeners and all of our clients and anybody who ever gives us time and space to be able to help them, which is fantastic. But also the fact that I was able to attend so many astrological events and conferences and really begin networking in that, and the growth that I've had with my personal astrological mentor, to the fact that I am now in the position of beginning to teach astrology. And I'm in the position of learning ancient Greek so I can help translate texts that aren't translated yet. And like, I never would have realized. And astrology was a revelation of my Saturn return. It was there before, naturally, but it really took root and got serious during the Saturn return. And I followed it. And this is where it's led me. And being able to be wholly and completely myself and that sustaining me is just such an amazing gift that this year has really revealed to me. How about you?
Same with the podcast or program, specifically the last retreat we did
Oh
was
my
just
God. Yeah,
such a highlight
that was
for
amazing.
those clients that are previous clients that are listening. We love you.
So much.
It was so much fun and just really magical. And it was the last retreat we were doing in Shamokin as well. So like there was a really cool chapter close energy along with it. So it was just magical. That was definitely one of the highlights. I turned 30 this year. So that was kind of fun. I liked that. And I honored that with going to Hawaii with my best friend. And that was really special. We had never gone on like that big of a trip together before. And it was really super wonderful. I also got to do a lot of really cool adventures with my kids. And they are now reached kind of that old enough level where I can like share things I'm really passionate about with them. So we got to go to like an anime con, and we also got to, I surprised them with Disneyland a couple weeks ago, but like we took them to Disney when they were younger, but then you had to like carry them and stuff. And now this time it's like, no, we can go and we can trade pins. We can do all of the cool stuff. So that was really cool to embrace them getting older. Which I really appreciated. There was definitely some significant like lows to the highs, of course. But that was pretty magical and awesome. And this feeling of the last month, basically, or last couple of weeks has been really awesome. Finally feeling like things are anchoring down and like following that kind of path has been pretty incredible. But genuinely, I also have just loved the amount of people I've gotten to meet this year.
Right?
Like it's just been so awesome, like through reading clients and workshop clients. And we went to Books, Gowns, and Crowns, and that was really, really cool. Meeting people there. We loved that. I mean, I really did. And then, me and my friend group got even closer and we did fun things together that we don't usually do. And just, it's just really neat. It was like a lot of really cool meeting and interacting with people. And just really unique, wonderful people from all over the world. And I'm just so honored and stoked by that. So I would say those are probably the big ones, the big highlights. Yeah, for sure. I will say, so things let's share one thing we're proud of ourselves for over this last year. I always think that's a really awesome practice because we tend to be hypercritical on ourselves. So like every year, whenever one of my kids has a birthday or on my birthday, and I got this practice from Broad City. So I will shout out to that show forever. I love it so fucking much. But what is one thing you were proud of yourself for doing in the past year? And what is one thing you're looking forward to doing in the next year?
Wow. So thinking about, again, how intense this last year has been, I'm proud that I have put myself out of my comfort zone and taken opportunities when they've arisen, that I've, put myself out there and been accepted, because I've put myself out there before in different situations and it has not been a welcoming environment, so this time I was like, I'm going to put myself out there here and maybe this is my place, and it's worked and it grows. And I'm proud of the fact that, certain circumstances led to my my partner and I moving. And I am proud of the way that we handled those situations. They were not easy. They are not moments in life that you want to repeat often. But as challenges in life, I think we rose to them, and I think we handled them as a partnership, which was incredible. And it's really paid off. And it's really like we have gotten such validation that the difficult choices that we made were correct. And it validated a lot of like past stuff for us too. So I think, the growing up and the believing in myself and trust that I put in myself over this last year. If I had to say, what am I proud of for me? It's the giving myself credit and letting myself trust my decisions and my own intuition even more. Which has been really magical and wonderful. It's opened up a lot of opportunity. Yeah.
I love that. I think For me, I think I'm proud of, because there was a lot of breakdown for me this year. It was a very big year of stuff crumbling and like examining very deep parts of my shadow and um you know, reassessing who I am and what I want and what matters and what doesn't matter. Like there's a lot of that. And so I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to go through that and then was still able to maintain things like faith in my psychic abilities and my spirit guides, and still looking for like the little things and the bright sides and things, even when things were really heavy and really dark and I was having a lot of mental health stuff going on, and just being able to kind of maintain that and grow through that and do it in a way that wasn't completely sacrificing my boundaries and myself, which is a habit of mine, and come out on the other side of that space. So I would say I'm really, really proud of that energy. I'm also really proud of the way I didn't get derailed when some things really didn't work out for no air quotes discernible reason. Because I've had a couple big things like that. Krista's aware of one significant one that just like showed up and then got completely wiped off the face of the earth for like no reason. That still hasn't really shown its purpose, but I was still able to like not let it completely shut me down and derail what I'm doing or why I'm doing things, and moving forward in that sort of space. Also, like just making more vulnerable and authentic connections, I think has been cool in like friendship spaces. Yeah, so I'm pretty proud of that, of getting through that in a way that didn't sacrifice all the previous growth, despite how heavy it was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's funny. It's been a year, and maybe some listeners are experiencing this too. One of the things my dad always said to me when I was a kid was, you have to get out of your own way. And I
Mhm.
think that in pieces, maybe both of us have learned a little bit about what that actually means this
Yeah.
year. Because you always hear that, get out of your own way. It's like, I'm not in my way. I want things to work. But then you find out how beliefs have been holding you back and certain things have been, making you sell yourself short. And
Yeah.
so it's funny, the proudest things that you have are when you do figure out ways to get out of your own way.
Yeah, my one of my favorite musicians ever is Nako and Medicine for the People, and they have a song called Dear Brother. And I actually got to witness the very first performance of this song ever. He literally unfolded a notebook paper and it was just him and his piano, and he's like, I wrote this on the drive down from Oregon. Like, let's give it a shot. And that is still, that you can find that performance on YouTube. But one of the main lyrics in the whole thing, and this was pre-2020, was you got to put down the weight and get out of your way. And it really reframes that exact energy of what it actually means to like put down the weight and like keep walking and get out of your own way. So I love that you encompass that. It's exactly like it just popped into my head. Now I'm going to go listen to it after this. It's also incredible. They have like this incredible violin solo that like starts it off, and the man who does the violin solo is from Truckee, which is basically across the lake from me. So like really cool, but it's just really neat energy. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So what's one thing you're looking forward to in the new year?
Gosh. So more opportunities have come up for certain amounts of travel.
I was just gonna say travel.
Well, so there's travel, but all of it has this great function where like I get to travel to learn more astrology and study with people that I admire. I get to travel to learn more at magical conferences, and maybe even partake. Like I'm on like a wait list to maybe speak at this magical conference. I'm getting into that kind of thing, and I'm getting into those scholarly magical environments. Like one of the things Emily and I are talking about is like maybe not storytelling astrologer so much as celestial librarian or something like that. That being a direction that's unfolding. So I'm looking forward to learning ancient languages to be able to contribute to be a link in the chain for future generations and share knowledge with as much integrity as possible. And of course, Greece and Ireland with the wonderful people who are listening here or who have listened in the past that we get to finally meet and interact with. That's going to be amazing.
Yes. On that note too, we did have one spot open up for Ireland. So if you want to join us for the Ireland writing retreat,
there is one
go check it out.
Available.
There is one spot. You're gonna look just how did we, it's not in my bio anymore.
Yeah, if you go on to Trova Trips and look up our names, you'll find it.
Yeah,
Trova,
go to
Trova.
Trova Trip, one word, and then look up our names.
Yeah.
It'll
I
populate.
think if you look up Emily and KristaLyn Ireland, you'll probably find it that way too. And
Exactly.
while you keep talking, I will confirm that for our listeners, so we will know.
Perfect. So yeah, I am massively looking forward to travel. I have 3 huge trips planned. So obviously there's Ireland and Greece. That's happening just this next summer. It's literally like June we do Greece, we have like a month break, and then bam, we're in Ireland. So it's really cool there. But also my husband for my 30th birthday got me a trip to Rome, and I will have sent queries to agents for La Costa by the time I'm in Rome, which means I'm looking forward to La Costa getting picked up this year. I'm looking forward to getting a literary agent and having La Costa picked up and being able to dive in and write more in that space. So I really feel that for myself this year, and I'm really looking forward to it and really getting more into the, like, as I mentioned, history, psychic sort of space, and combining that with writing, and making connections in those spaces. I'm really thrilled about. It's going to be super duper fun. Also, I'm really stoked on this next cohort of the Forgotten Storytellers. I'm very looking forward to that.
I can't wait to go through all this energy we've been talking about with them.
Yeah,
It's going to be amazing.
too.
Oh my
It's going
gosh.
to be really cool. So if you've joined, we're so excited. We still have like a little, like I think a spot or 2 left. So we're just going to like open that up if you want to submit in a pitch, or if you're like,
This is
no, we're doing
the
the next
last
one.
week. Yeah, this is the
Yeah.
last week to submit your pitch. Go ahead if it feels like the right thing to do. Go for it. We would love to see you there.
Because this is going to be really cool with the next cohort. Just really interesting.
Cool. Yeah,
I'm
once
so
in a
excited.
generation kind of energy,
It's
basically.
really once in a generation kind of energy. I cannot stress enough. There's no better time to write your book right now. Like and I'm not just bullying it. Like, you don't even have to do it with us. Do it on your own if you want to do it on your, but like, do it, please. It is the time. It's so cool.
If I'm looking into the astrology for the next couple years, because I keep talking about 2023, 2024, and 2026, really, these are the years to do it. And this is one of the peaks. This has a lot of the change coming. So this is going to be a very charged up cohort. So there's going to be a lot. And if you want to be able to go through that with a group of people who are magically inclined and working on healing the world, this is a great time to do that. Also, Emily and KristaLyn Ireland Writing Retreat. We will be the first Google result. So, and hopefully we can also probably put the link in the description for the YouTube video, at least.
Yes, definitely. But yeah, those are stuff I'm really looking forward to for this next year. Also, so let's just wrap this up then. Bookends. What were your favorite reads of the year?
Okay.
Or you can also talk about what you read in the last month too, if you want to, but like,
I'm going to do both because there's a sequel that I'm reading in the last month that is just, it's exceeding expectations, I have to say. So the first book that gave me hope, where I was running out of a little bit of hope. And you all know what I'm going to say. Anybody who's been listening for a while, it's So This Is Ever After. And the reason it gave me hope is because it so naturally paints a picture of a world where everybody just accepts each other. And I kin so many of I kin the main character very much. So I like just the acceptance that you got to feel and the support you got to feel through that main character was really cool. And for when I was reading it, it was needed. So that was really cool. I highly recommend that book. The vibe of it is healing in a book, which is everything I love. I have an illuminated copy of it or a fancy copy of it, and I'll just read pieces of it every once in a while because it catches that energy so well. It's like a crystal, but it's a book. And that's the idea. Anybody who's thinking about writing a book, that's the idea of Forgotten Storytellers. But also,
that's what we're making.
Yeah, the book I'm reading right now is the second installation of the Legendborn series, Bloodsworn, I believe it is. Oh my God. Bloodmarked. Thank you. So good. So good. The
Barnes and Noble has signed copies for sale right now for $9.99. Just going to throw that out there.
Okay, well now I might have to actually go to Barnes and Noble today because I can't.
I had like a big email from them of like, these are like discounted signed copies, and that's like basically over 10% off. I was like,
honestly, it's looking like this. Emily and I have this thing where we will either do a digital version or an audio version of a book, and then if it's a book we want on our shelves, a fancy copy of it will end up on our shelves. And this is one that I think might actually end up on the shelf. I'm very pleased with it. The thing I recognized today was the plot twists happen at a great pace. Like you don't know, there's no drag And even if there is a drag, you're
I like
thinking
that.
there's little hints being dropped. The writing is great. The characters are great. The education I'm getting about culture and context and privilege and all of these things is not hurting me. And it's not like attacking me, but it is educating me. And so I feel like a witness to something that I wouldn't normally have the scope to be able to explore on my own with my life experience, which again is the point of high vibe fiction.
Yep.
So, I wrote a book in 2020 describing high vibe fiction. And this was one of the really big things for me. And reading it now, like in pages and things, and just seeing, because I wrote the book because there wasn't enough of it out there, seeing other people putting it out there and seeing it get recognition, which by the way, it deserves more of, especially this book. It's really great. And I'm also honored that we get to be a part of helping people create more of it with the Forgotten Storytellers. But yeah, so the Legendborn series is one I recommend for many reasons. And then So This Is Ever After is a really great one too. And So This Is Ever After is also a very light, quick, casual read. What I like about Legendborn is it draws you in. It's got that epic fantasy feel. You get some Arthurian stuff. You get so much cultural education from, the root craft that they talk about and the Arthurian and all this other stuff that's really cool. So yeah, definitely read it because it's going to only ever benefit you. And it's going to be thoroughly entertaining and exciting at the same time.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's so awesome. Tracy Dion. It's just apps.
Thank you for remembering the author's name.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just looking at the book because I just got an email that it was on sale for the signed copy is on sale. They have a bunch of really cool signed copies on sale right now.
Well,
anyway,
see, I'm thinking about getting a bigger bookshelf, like an actual bigger bookshelf, because I have a small bookshelf next to me, but it's all astrology. So I need like my astrology bookshelf and my fiction bookshelf. And then like one of them can be my background here. So you can see all the books and maybe you'll see which, like, it'll be a book recommendation list just behind me. I don't know. Yeah. Thinking about it.
So this year was a weird reading year for me. I'm not gonna lie. There was not very many hits. There was a crap load of misses. Which this is basically since end of October, I started to be on like getting pulled out of my reading slump. What I will say 100% the absolute best book I have read this year is Light from Uncommon Stars by Raika Aoki. It is one of the best books I have ever read in my entire life. It is a Hugo Award-winning book. It's incredible. It cured my depression and gave me back my passion for life and existence, 100%. And I will say that with everything. It is amazing. I could take my system a little bit even further for rating books. So like if I like a book, it's fine. It'll just stay on my digital. I liked it. It was great. If I love a book, it becomes a hardcover copy on my bookshelf and it is prized. And I maybe will even get more than one copy of it because I love it so very much. And then if I am like utterly obsessed with a book and it changed my life at like a deep core level, then it gets tattooed on me. So
yeah.
It goes on the sleeve, which is on my left-hand side. And this one will absolutely be a tattoo and I will absolutely post it so you guys can see once I get it. I can't describe the actual premise of this book. It's too complicated. And I will say it's not necessarily for everyone. And I acknowledge that. It is multiple POV per chapter. So it does a lot of like constricted POV jumping. It's really amazing. It focuses a lot on Asian American communities, especially in California, and how they function and work together and all of that. The premise, if I could give it a premise, if this is like I was like writing the back or the tagline for it, it would be a queer trans runaway violinist, a demon, and an alien walk into a donut shop. That's the premise of the book. And it is found family. It is beautiful. And I immediately recommended it to one of my very good friends and she read it in less than a week and was like, cool, it's now one of my favorite books of all time. And I was like, yep, that's just what it does. So I can't recommend that enough. So that was also what I finished reading this month. I'm now reading The Marriage Point Portrait, which I'm really loving. It is a historical fiction based off of the life of one of the Medici daughters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's the same author who wrote Hamnet, which was more famous of a book.
Mhm.
But it's really well written. The perspective is really interesting. And basically she's kind of doing what I'm doing with Lacusta, is giving a woman back her story that we don't know a ton about. And basically the first line, like the author's note on the very first page, is Lucrezia died in this age. Everyone said it was from sickness. Most people believe she was murdered by her husband. And like that's the first line. And then it goes into the story. So yeah, it's really interesting and I really, really like it. But I had to like pivot after I read Light from Uncommon Stars because I keep holding onto it and listening to snippets of it and just loving it so much. I was like, what do I read now? I need to read totally different genre, that's why I jumped from like magical realism, which is what Light from Uncommon Stars is, to historical fiction to switch it up a little bit. And it was a good choice. I'm also, so I also just got gifted a bunch of hardcover books that I'm going to be reading as well in the new year. Which I'm really excited on. The other one I would say is a good takeaway that I really loved. I loved Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, just awesome. And I loved The Secret Society of Irregular Witches by Sengu. That's her first name. I just based on her last name. But both of those were really awesome as well. Legends and Lattes is such a fast read. You can get through it in a day and a half. Like it is so quick. But those were other highlights. 2020 was my best reading year on record. I like almost every book I read was like incredible. 2022 or 2021 was kind of like meh. 2022 was like until literally like the last 2 months, and then it was like awesome. So it's been a weird trend. Just diving and trying to find more high vibe books to align with.
Sangu Mandana.
Thank you. I started with an M. I was like, what's it?
Yeah, it's Mandanna. So if I'm mispronouncing that, you can look it up and then find that author anyway. But fun fact about the Medicis, they actually sponsored, I believe it was Marsilio Ficino who wrote a lot of the astrology books. Well, several of the astrology books that we use today, which is really helpful and interesting. But of course,
recommend it.
Ficino had to then write to their tastes because he was employed. But
I recommend reading it. I mean, I'm only like halfway through right now, but it's really interesting. And I really like the way that it's written and the like jumps perspective, but with the same character. So like one chapter will be about her when she realizes her husband's gonna kill her. And then it'll go back in time. And the next chapter is kind of back in time. And then the next one's like the next step after she realizes her husband will kill her. And then it goes back in time again. It's really interesting and beautiful. So the timeline jumps are really cool and the way it's presented is really cool. And it's just really lush. And it just, again, reclaiming women's stories or, women presenting people or like, minority stories from history. It's really, 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 really important.
Which especially as we're coming into the new year with Venus conjunct Pluto, empowering women. And bringing through the history and justifying that and reviving it is definitely something that the energy supports.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's my reading wrap.
Yeah.
Please share with us in the YouTube, like what was the best book you read this year? Please, we would love to hear about it.
And these books are also on our recommended reading list for our Patreon. Which is, I think they're all on there now, right?
Yep, they're all on the Patreon. So on the Patreon, we have included now a list of our favorite books, our recommended books, our high vibe books that we recommend you read. That's on the Patreon. Our exclusive videos are on the Patreon. You get the podcast a day earlier. I mean, there's a bunch of different stuff and you get to interact with us there. So if that feels aligned for you in the new year, we would love to have you in that space. We have had a couple of patrons join recently, like
hello.
On the top tier. So hello, we're just calling you out. You're awesome. We appreciate you.
And if you have any questions, you can ask them in there and we will answer those on the podcast. So
we'll absolutely answer those on the podcast. The other thing with that as well is if you have ideas for topics that you would like us to cover on the show, please comment in the Patreon and we will put them up for vote and cover them eventually. We would love to. That sounds great.
With that said, we do have a special episode coming up in January where we'll be covering runes. So we'll have a guest for that as well. So look forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. But set your resolutions in a way that feels aligned with you. Try them out. Be willing to abandon them if they don't feel good anymore, or adjust them. And we are just stoked to be part of your past year and this next year going forward. So thank you for being here. Yep. And we hope that you take this energy, have a happy new year, and you
Go make
go
some
make some
magic.
magic. Bye.